So welcome everybody to today's session. We're going to be taking a look at positive intelligence and mental fitness. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Lucy. I'm one of the wellness coaches at the Campus Health and Wellness Center. And my goal is to empower you to get out of your head and own your superpowers, your sage superpowers, so that you can stop self-sabotaging. Should you require it, you can click the three dots at the bottom and you should be able to select live transcript. I'd also like to just take a moment to set the tone for today's event with a gentle reminder that we're here to learn and engage with one another from a place of respect and kindness, and disrespectful or abusive language will not be tolerated. Either verbally or in the chat feature. And so participation in today's event is an opportunity to listen, to think critically, and to engage with the material. And I want to invite you to reflect and ask questions. Participation is welcome. I would like to also acknowledge that this is a busy time. We're in week 4. And so thank you for making time in your days to attend today's session. And the fact that you're here today shows to me that you're committed to your mental fitness. And to help you get into the right space for today's session, I just want to invite you to get comfortable in your chairs if you're sitting. Take a moment to get your spine up nice and straight, and relax. Put your feet on the floor. Just take a moment to take a couple of deep breaths in and out. Breathe with me, in and out. And as you are exhaling, exhale all of that, mind chatter, all of that busyness that's going on in your heads, just leading up to today. Let go of all those thoughts that are no longer serving you. Park them for the next hour. And on your next breath, I want to invite you to take your hand and your right hand and just put it on your stomach and notice the rise and the fall as you breathe in and out. And just center ourselves and relax and open ourselves up. And I want to take a moment as well to start off our session today in a good way by acknowledging the land that Durham College sits on. So Durham College sits on the territories of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nations, covered under the Williams Treaties. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to be here with you to grow as an individual and support student learning and development on these lands. And as someone of Portuguese descent, I reflect on and acknowledge my Eurocentric perspective around colonization, and I sit with the impact that my ancestors have had on the Indigenous folks around the world. And given that we are joining from different locations, I would also like to invite you to join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge our collective responsibility to improving our relationships with the land and our understanding of Indigenous people and their culture. So today we're here to talk about mental fitness. And I'm going to be talking to you about mental fitness and how to grow the 3 core muscles to thrive in challenging times. So this is based on the content developed by Shehzad Shamim, the author of Positive Intelligence. The nice thing about working from home is I got my library just behind me. So it's based on the principles of this book. And I want you to take a moment to picture yourself thriving. What would that look like for you? And feel free to put that into the chat or unmute yourself. What would it look like for you if you were thriving?
I'll go.
Okay.
I would just like to say thriving, I would feel like physically well is where I feel thriving, that I have the strength to kind of carry through the day, and that helps my mental health and that kind of thing. But for me, it's a physical, feeling physically well.
Mm-hmm.
To not feel tired in my day, I guess. That would be, yeah.
Okay, so not feeling tired. Zebo or Angie or Taylor, anything you'd like to add?
I think the feeling and the sense that you are moving forward, that you're not stuck, that there's an opportunity, you're growing. It's a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, moving forward, not stuck, growing, accomplishment, not tired. Okay, so now picture yourself thriving through your current personal challenges. How would you feel if you were thriving through some of those personal challenges that you are experiencing right now?
Seems a lot easier.
Yeah.
Just seems more flawless, and like I would breeze through it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what kind of impact would that have on your life?
You were saying earlier, Lucy, about a person, like having to be personal, but I think that if you're thriving, it's going to also, everything else, all other aspects of your life are going to thrive as well. So professionally, it's so interconnected that it's going to, kind of bleed through everything.
Yeah, definitely. And it's true, right? Angie, you hit that. Your life is interconnected. So when you work on one aspect of your life, it impacts other aspects of your life as well. And so mental fitness, which the definition for is your capacity to respond to life's challenges with a positive rather than a negative mindset. And so it's your ability to not get so stressed out or get so upset. And I would love to learn more about all of you and what you think your own personal benefit to you would be of strengthening your mental fitness. And so if you could either just unmute yourselves or put it into the chat, what are the reasons that you want to strengthen your mental fitness?
I think it would be helpful to be more proactive versus reactive. I think the more well you are, you're probably more prone to be proactive than reactive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that you're able to respond versus reacting. Yeah. If you think about, and I'm going to I'll go back and forth between sharing my screen and not sharing my screen. But if you think about mental fitness in terms of physical fitness, most of us are average level of physical fitness, although I know some of you over the Flex Center are a little bit more than above average with your physical fitness. But if we think about ourselves and our abilities, most of us are able to go for a nice hike, right? Up a nice sized hill, a nice sized, hill. And we're okay. We might get a little bit, sore if we go hiking for a long time. We might even, if the hill's a little bit extra steep, we might start to feel a little out of breath. As the hill gets steeper, we might find that we're starting to struggle a little bit with that task. The steeper that hill gets, or the higher that mountain, the more physical strain we experience. Well, the same thing happens with our mental fitness, right? Most of us have a moderate level of mental fitness. We're able to handle life's regular challenges without a problem, or at least with relative levels of stress, right? And we need to welcome relative levels of stress. We need a little bit of stress in our lives. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when you're faced with something out of the ordinary, like, I don't know, coronavirus that's been going on for 2 years. We hit midterms, and life is happening all around us, and there's a whole bunch of things going on, and things start to pile on, and you've got multiple competing, things that are going on, life starts to feel like a big mountain is right in front of you. And those negative emotions start to take a hold of you. And it starts to impact your performance. It starts to impact your peace of mind. Your overall wellness starts to deteriorate. You may start to question your ability to handle that mountain, to handle life, to handle whatever it is you're faced with. And the reality is you've been, dealing with all of these things, right? And with relative, amounts of stress. But then something really big comes up. And when you work on strengthening your mental fitness, what you're doing is you're working on preparing yourself for that big climb. And so that you're better able to handle that challenge that comes your way, and that you're better able to do that with a clear head instead of getting all stressed out and upset. So going back to that physical piece, when you're training, you're setting yourself up so that you're able to run that marathon, lift those heavy weights. It's the same thing with your mental fitness. The act as well of training, or the act of getting to the other side of that mountain, also helps you build your capacity, right? So that when you end up on the other side of that mountain after that challenge, you emerge stronger, fitter, and then those smaller hills don't seem as difficult to climb. And so that's what we're working on. That's what we're talking about. And when you increase your mental fitness, it has an impact. It impacts your performance. You're better able to perform. You'll experience more peace of mind and overall wellness. It will also have a trickle-down effect into other areas of your life, including relationships, and you'll feel better prepared to handle conflict when it does arise. So research shows that, or what I mean to say is that mental fitness is founded in research. And it basically, takes the research from positive psychology, performance science, neuroscience, and cognitive behavior psychology. And what it does is these 4 different elements provide the foundation for the mental fitness operating system that I'm going to take you through today. And so the research comes from a whole bunch of, different areas. So Shirzad Chamine has, met with and worked with and conducted research on hundreds of CEOs and their executive teams, students at Stanford University, world-class athletes, and there has been over, 500,000 participants from 50 different countries that have participated in this research. And then it was summarized into that book that I talked about. So the research began with the power factor analysis. So looking at the root cause and then simplifying things. So when we take a look at that, if we kind of break down things and we think about colors, right? An example of the root cause is that all colors come from red, blue, and green, right? And so it's the same type of idea here, that, the results of all of this research was that there are only 3 core muscles that are the root of mental fitness. And they are, the Saboteur Interceptor, the Sage, and the self-command muscle. And then it turns out that there are 10 saboteurs and 5 sage powers. And the key thing to understand is that we're driven by both the saboteurs and the sage. And how we are driven is different for each of us. So some people call this the Jedi Mindset. So if you're fans of Star Wars, you'll relate to this, because inside your brain, there's that constant war that's going on between the inner Darth Vader, your saboteurs, and your inner Jedi, the sage. And we all have this within us. So saboteurs are automatic mental habits that are associated with our feelings, and they react to the things that have helped us survive. And all saboteurs are equal destroyers and equally problematic. And so I'm curious, did any of you happen to do the saboteur assessment? Okay. If not, I'll put the link into the chat as well. So what we're going to start with today is the first kind of core muscle that we're going to explore is the Saboteur Interceptor. So intercepting that Darth Vader inside of your head is that first core muscle. And we want to start by intercepting it because that's what's causing your negative emotions and the majority of the stress that you experience. So to help us, we need to identify who are these saboteurs. So we all have the judge. He's the master, he or she is the master saboteur. And, you know, have you experienced the judge saboteur? Have you noticed that pop up? Yeah, most of us have probably experienced some kind. We all experience it a little bit differently. So there's 3 different dimensions to the saboteur or to the judge. So there's the inner judge, the voice that tells you that you're, you know, failing, that you're beating yourself up over, that you're not doing well, that reminds you of all your failures, everything bad that you've ever done, every little, you know, ounce of criticism. It's there to remind you. Then there's the judge of others, the one that's a little bit more critical of others. And then the third mode is the judge of circumstances. And it's the one that keeps telling you that, you know, things are wrong and things won't be any better until, you know, something happens. You know, life sucks right now because of this pandemic, and things aren't going to get any better until this pandemic is over. Right? You know, those kinds of messages where they're always looking at what is going on around you. So you might find that you might experience one of these a little bit stronger than the other. You might find that you might be harsher on yourself than others. We all experience all 3 of these. But your judge might be more active in one of these areas than in another. And it might be more active in some situations versus other situations. Each negatively impacts our well-being. It negatively impacts our performance. It impacts our relationship. And so it's helpful for us to understand how our judge shows up. So you might also notice that it shows up in different ways depending on that circumstance. And a lot of our stress comes from the judge pointing out things, right? So I want to invite you to think about a stressful moment or a moment where you felt really frustrated. How is your judge showing up?
With anger?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing is about the judge is that it doesn't play alone, right? It likes to bring one of its saboteur friends along. And then, you know, we've got the controller, the hyperachiever, restless, stickler, pleaser, hypervigilant, avoider, victim, hyper-rational. Those are the 9 accomplice saboteurs. And what happens when our judge teams up with one of these? They overtake our sage. They overtake our inner Jedi. And our saboteurs, they like to tell us that they're good for us. They like to tell us that you know, remind you of all the good things that they've done for you, of how they've helped you get to where you are right now. Our saboteurs, they are, you know, founded on our strengths. It's just that they're basically our strengths on overdrive, our strengths that have gone too far. And so, you know, our desire, or the fact that we're a caring individual, I mean, that's a great strength to have. except when it goes into pleaser mode and now it's gone too far. And you're doing it at, you know, at what cost, at what risk? And then what kind of, you know, negative emotion comes up when you start to feel, you know, frustrated or upset with how people are perceiving it, or that people are walking all over you, or, you know, there's that negative emotion that then comes up. So learning about our own saboteurs also helps us to better understand how you're causing your own stress, how you're sabotaging yourself and your relationships, how it's impacting your wellness, your work environment. And this isn't to make anybody feel bad, right? Because we all have this. That is the one thing, like, we all have a commonality here. We all have, you know, the same, our saboteurs might look different, right? Our results might look different, but we all have a little bit of each of them within us. And when you complete your assessment, you'll get a quick little report that looks something like this, that allows you to see a little bit more about how your saboteurs are showing up for you. You'll also receive some information about your saboteurs to help you better identify what's going on for you, so that you can start noticing, so that you can start intercepting them and building that core muscle. And you start doing this by identifying, acknowledging when that saboteur has been activated, and identifying what kind of lies is your saboteur telling you. And then with time, you know, you'll start catching those lies. You'll start noticing when the saboteurs are activated, and you'll start doing that a little bit quicker. So as you can see here, James's top saboteur is the controller, within the next three being tied. And the idea is that if you start working on targeting your top ones, the other ones will also diminish. So this is kind of like the little, each saboteur has a bit of a write-up that gives you a little bit more information. So we can see here a little bit more detail about the stickler, you know, who tends to be that perfectionist. Maybe some of us have a little bit of stickler within us. Maybe some of us, you know, can recognize that in our partners or in our friends or family. It is helpful to kind of do a little bit of reading and see kind of what shows up, right? So, you know, being a perfectionist, there's some good things around that. It's just that you can probably also see where perfectionists can become a hindrance and where it can start to self-sabotage you. So our saboteurs and our sage, you know, they live in different parts of our brains. And so just kind of knowing that that's another kind of visual of where there's a little bit of conflict there. They even live in different parts of our heads. And the other piece too is that our saboteurs, they motivate you through negative emotion. Things like, whereas the sage motivates you through positive emotions. So the saboteurs will use things like fear and stress and anger and guilt and shame to help you do things. Whereas the sage provides you with a little bit more of like a positive spin on things. Like, you know, they come at from like more of an empathetic, a curious, a creative place. And the other thing too is that our saboteurs, they motivate you by pushing you, by, you know, threatening these negative feelings, right? Whereas the sage will be like, pulls you towards the positive. So one way of looking at this is thinking about an athlete, right? If you are about to take a shot on net and you know that this is like a super critical moment in the game, if you miss that shot, you're losing. Your team is going to lose. Everybody's going to be disappointed. And if you're focusing on that, the fact that if you miss this shot, that everybody's going to be disappointed, you're focusing on missing the shot, as opposed to, if I get this shot, we're going to win. You're being driven by the win. You're focusing on getting the shot. Just a switch in language can have a huge impact on your perspective, on your headspace, and your success with it. So our saboteurs, they, might generate some success, but not the happiness, and not the, it's not lasting. And it doesn't come from a good place, right? It's coming from that fear, from that stress. Whereas your sage will generate probably a higher success, as well as more sustained success and sustained happiness. So if you want to be happy in the long run, you want to be motivated by your sage. You want to be pulled by those positive emotions and not being doing things out of fear. So we've talked a little bit about negative emotions, right? So I want to ask the question, are negative emotions good for you? So Zibo's like, no. What are other people thinking?
I did do the quiz actually, Lucy, and I've been getting the emails, and I read something, I think it was in yesterday's, that said, you can have negative emotion, but how long do you have to sit with it? You can sit with it for a split second and then it can be gone. And that was a bit of an aha for me, that like I don't have to stay there. I can be fearful or mad or angry and then leave it.
Yeah, exactly. Which kind of another related question is pain good for you, right? So pain is only good for you for a short period of time. It alerts you. It's good to feel a little bit of pain. So like if you think about putting your hand on something that's hot, like the hot stove, if it didn't, burn your hand, you would, like if you didn't feel anything, you would keep your hand on that hot stove. It would burn, right? You would end up like with a burnt hand. So there, in that moment, it's a good thing to feel a little bit of pain, but there's no benefit to keeping your hand on that. No, it's hot and you shouldn't touch it. And so our negative emotions are like that. They serve a purpose. They serve a purpose to alert you, right? They're a warning sign. So staying in there for a short period of time, long enough to know that this isn't good. There's something going on here. There's a message that it's sending you that, with stress, something needs to change. I can't stay here. This frustration, this anger, something needs to change. So the same thing applies to life and stress. If you don't feel some stress, you're not going to take any action, right? And then you could potentially expose yourself to real dangers or real risks. And so, it's that reminder that negative emotions are only helpful for that short little alert. When you have negative emotions for longer than that alert, you become engaged in that saboteur. The saboteur becomes engaged. You become more mentally fit as you recognize and intercept those saboteurs. So you don't want to feel those negative emotions for too long, right? The value of that negative emotion is to wake you up to it. So it's just reminding yourself that it is an alert, that it has been activated, and that it's time to now look at how am I going to go about intercepting it. The problem is that the part of your brain that has access to the problem solving and coming up with a solution rests in the sage brain. That's the part of your brain that, needs a calm, clear-headed, place to be. So when your saboteur is activated, it takes over that ability to have a clear head. That's why, we talk about take a deep breath, pause before you press send on that angry email that you're, responding to somebody. We talked about, that difference between being proactive, about responding versus just getting triggered. And when you have a high degree of mental fitness, you're better able to take action with a clear, level-headed. You're able to react. You're better able to shift into that sage power and address those challenges with a clear head. So the next core muscle that we're going to look at is the sage. So if we understand how to intercept our saboteurs, we can then think about, how do we activate our sage? So the sage lives in the region of your brain associated with positive emotions, with peace, calm, a clear-headed focus. It's able to be creative. It's able to think about the big picture. And it operates from the sage perspective. This is where your inner Jedi lives. And your sage perspective is the belief that every outcome or circumstance can be turned into a gift or opportunity. That every outcome or circumstance can be turned into a gift or opportunity. So think about the coronavirus, think about COVID-19. What are some gifts and opportunities that have come out of it for you? What are some good things that have happened in the last 2 years?
A good long rest.
Yeah. Things have slowed down a little bit for some of us, right? We've been able to kind of breathe, right? We've been able to slow down, not rush as much. Angie, were you going to share something? Or did I see your hand up?
I was just going to say, being able to tap into my hobbies more and actually dedicate time specifically to things that I've always wanted to do or practice that I didn't necessarily have time for before. So yeah, that's something that I was able to do a lot more over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And I really related Lucy to the whole slowing down. I don't think any of us, but lots of us didn't realize how busy we were. And I loved not looking at my watch constantly. Hey, I gotta get home at this time to walk the dog before it gets dark. It's getting dark so early, so I need, everything was constantly about time. And another gift for me was I started, because I knew my parents, who are obviously seniors, were at home on their own. I started to call them every day, and I've continued that. So I've talked to my parents every single day for the last 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So different things like that, where you start to look at what are all of these little changes and little things that you've taken on or let go of, right? We joke around about certain things that we don't do as much of anymore. There isn't this pressure to say yes to every outing and every invitation, right? We got this great excuse, COVID-19, right? Can't do it. Sorry, COVID-19. I'm doing it for the better good of everybody else, right? So little things, not like Angie said, not being so controlled by our watches and the minutes and the time, right? Oh, I've got to get up at this time. I've got to leave the house by this time. There's, X amount of time to get to work, so that I can get up to my desk. Whew, so much nicer to be able to just walk down the hall and turn on my computer, right? Sit with my coffee that's, freshly made. I don't even have to go all the way to Tim Hortons to get my coffee, right? There's little things. Maybe I've saved some money because of the fact that, I'm not going to Tim Hortons, but I'm instead, supporting a local coffee shop by buying the beans from there. Maybe I've changed the way I do my grocery shopping. I'm not going as often anymore, which saves me time. You know, like little things. Oh, I'm going for a walk at lunch and getting fresh air, because if I didn't, I wouldn't see the outdoors. But when I was at work, I wasn't as motivated to do that. So, you know, it's thinking about those things, right? So I don't know if any of you have heard of the Stallion Story at all. Okay, so Angie has heard of this. I am going to take a moment and share it. So there is this sage old farmer, and he lives on a farm with his teenage son. And he has this beautiful stallion that he lovingly cares for. So the farmer enters his stallion into the annual, you know, country fair competition, and his stallion wins first prize. The farmer's neighbors come over and they congratulate him on his win. And the farmer calmly says, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" Puzzled by his reaction, the neighbors go away. The next week, some thieves break into his farm and they steal the stallion. The farmers come over and commiserate with him, and oh my goodness, you know, so sorry to hear about this. And he says, again, very calmly, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" Several days later, his stallion escapes from the thieves, and he finds his way back. And as he's finding his way back to the farm, he meets some wild mares along the way who follow him. And so now, not only has a stallion returned, but he's also brought a bunch of other horses with him. And the neighbors come back and they're offering congratulations and like, woohoo, you know. And again, he says, who knows what is good and what is bad? And then a few weeks later, it's a very eventful farm. A few weeks later, the farmer's son is trying to ride one of those wild mares, and he gets thrown off and he breaks his leg. And the neighbors come over to commiserate, and, you know, and once again, he says, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" The following week, the army shows up and they're conscripting all of the eligible young males. And the farmer's son, who has a broken leg, doesn't get conscripted. So he's spared. So again, you know, the neighbors come over and they know by now that he's going to say, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" So the sage perspective is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe the sage perspective, then it's going to be, right? But if you believe in the saboteurs, then that's what's going to be, right? So think about it for a minute. You know, if you're in the middle of a project and it's not going well, and you start to focus on what isn't going well, and all of a sudden, all that you see is what's not going well. You start getting upset, you start getting stressed out, you start getting frustrated, and all of that negativity is contagious. Those around you start feeling that as well. It builds, it spreads. And now everybody starts to feel those negative emotions. And you're unable to see any options or any solutions. And you're just wasting a lot of emotional energy. You start to feel stuck, right? You're not thriving. You're kind of stuck there. You're not able to see how to move forward. You're not able to see clearly. We even say that sometimes. I just can't see clearly right now. Chances are when you're feeling that way, it's because your negative emotions are, you know, activated. Your saboteurs are activated. They're taking over. So, you know, if you believe in the sage perspective and you're able to bring with you some curiosity, some empathy, you're able to start to explore what could be the gifts. What may I learn from this situation? What is actually going on in this, you know, project that I'm working on? What kind of empathy can I bring to this situation? Maybe you'll realize you know, that there's somebody's experiencing some challenges. And you start to explore, start to dig a little bit deeper. And then you can start seeing what some of the gifts are. Perhaps, you know, your one teammate had been tasked with doing something that they were really struggling with that didn't play to their strength, right? Maybe the task that they were responsible for wasn't really in alignment with their strengths. And maybe just a simple shift of tasks might, you know, somebody else might end up doing something that's easy for them and that they enjoy versus, you know, concentrating on that other task that they had been assigned. So, you know, you can start exploring things and looking at other alternatives. And, you know, so if you think about how often you take that saboteur perspective and think about, you know, how that leaves you feeling when you're in the saboteur mode, right? It's not that you won't get out of that situation. You'll probably still get that assignment done, but it might not go as well. It might even take longer. And you more than likely will feel more exhausted and drained afterwards. So if you want to work on building that inner Jedi, you need to be open. You need to approach the situation from a place of curiosity. You need to explore what those gifts could be. So even just asking yourself that question, you know, what gift can I create for myself, for my family, for my friends, for my team? And the more that you see, the more you're going to see, right? Because positivity also has a spiraling effect. So it's kind of like that whole concept of like, you start to think about, you know, I want to, you see a car you really like, you're car shopping, and all of a sudden, that's all you see is that car everywhere, right? Because you're focusing in on that. So if you focus on the negative, that's all you're going to see. And it's going to grow. But if you make that flip and you start to focus on the positive aspect of things, you'll start to see more positive. And your energy will be a little bit different.
I kind of had a question.
Yeah, for sure.
I think like I applied that a lot into my life.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized being that optimism sometimes covers up the real issue, the real problem, because you're still hoping that things going to change and get better.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we really figure out what should we really sabotage and what should we not, and turn into something positive?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And what I would say is, you know, when you take a look at that, it's not about just parking it and not dealing with it. It's about looking at it with a clearer head and looking at it without any judgment. So sometimes it's about taking a step back so that you can really see what is the problem, like what's really going on, and not being so attached to it, so that you can discern and kind of start looking at it a little bit differently, and start looking at, you know, what are some of the opportunities that can come from this? I mean, it depends on what the problem is, right? But it's about taking a moment to really kind of like, okay, how am I going to deal with this? What can I learn from this situation? What is this situation teaching me? What is this situation, you know, what information is there? Exploring it a little bit deeper, like what is really going on? Sometimes we have these superficial level, I call them superficial level problems, not that they're meaningless, but there's something deeper going on, right? So like I as a wellness coach, people will often come and they'll say, you know, I've got this challenge that's going on. But the challenge, if we just go about fixing that challenge, it's going to show up again, but it's going to be look like the story will be different, but it'll still keep showing up, right? So it's about, you got to get under what is actually going on. What are those underlying issues? What's the limiting beliefs? Like what's really happening there? And when you work on hitting that, then you're able to, move forward. But in order to be able to do that, you've got to have that clear head. And if you're in that place of anger and stress and that place of negative emotion, you can't see anything else because you're stuck, right? So you can't open yourself up to kind of explore and to be curious and to investigate and to try and figure out what the actual solution is. So I don't know if that helped or if that made things more confusing.
It does, but how do we calm ourselves down when we want to explode, but trying to hold pressure in?
Yeah. So one of the things with mental fitness is something that they refer to as the PQ reps, right? So it's doing those little exercises like catching your breath, taking a moment to pause in it, to, notice that this has happened. So now what am I going to do? Right? It's taking that moment to break. But you can't, the first step is just recognizing that the saboteur, that there is a negative emotion, right? And sometimes, as we work on developing this, sometimes you won't realize it until after the fact.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. I sometimes find myself in a situation where you walk away from something, you're like, oh my goodness, that was so frustrating, right? Or that was so unproductive. And then I sit back and I kind of start thinking about it. I was like, wow, my judge was highly activated and it was having a party with somebody else's, right? Mm-hmm. And you start to see where it comes in. And that's just a part of that first step, right? Is recognizing it so that you can intercept it, so that you can then take that moment to okay, I need to stop. So it's about activating a whole other, operating system. It's about changing how you go about doing things. So I'm just going to share my screen again. That question, right? Which perspective is true? Just kind of going back to that. Is the saboteur bad? Is the sage a gift? And it really comes down to, whichever one you believe. So the third, and we're going to get into a little bit more detail about what you just said with the question you just asked Sibo, but the third muscle is the self-command muscle. And for most of the time, we're not fully in command of our minds, because if we were, we wouldn't wake up in the middle of the night all stressed out. We wouldn't get all rattled up and upset, right? So our stressors are not the things that we choose. They just kind of happen sometimes, right? So our saboteurs, for the most part, they're running our minds. They're the ones that are in control. So when you work on strengthening your self-command muscle, you start to run the show a little bit more. You start to observe yourself. You start to notice when the saboteurs have been activated. And when that happens, you can now start to shift from that negative saboteur into that sage, clear-headed mode. And so the way to do it is by doing things like the 10-second PQ reps. And so rather than explain it to you, I'm going to get you to do another one with me. So we did earlier, we just kind of started by focusing on our breath for a minute. So what I'm going to get you to do, and there's a whole bunch of different ways to go about doing this. So we're just going to try a couple. So, a simple one is just taking a couple of deep breaths, right? So breathe with me. Deep breath in, just let it out. Some people find it helpful to close their eyes when they're doing breathing exercises. Totally up to you if you want to do that. But just taking a couple more deep breaths, breathing in, breathing out. even focusing on how your chest and your stomach move as you breathe in and out. So I invite you to put one hand on your chest and one hand on your stomach. Just breathe in, focus on your hands and how they're moving. Breathe out, focus on that movement. And just take notice of that. So we did that for 1 minute, right? That was pretty short. And we're going to do another one together. So I want you to take your fingers and I want you to rub them ever so gently together. Just focus on the sensations as you rub your fingers ever so gently. Focus on the ridges of your fingers. Probably never noticed how you can feel them or how defined they are as you rub your fingers ever so gently. And just bring all of your attention to that sensation of your fingers moving. Now bring both of your hands together and move your fingers up and down your hand ever so gently, just focusing on the sensations as you move your hands up and down ever so gently. And kind of noticing the ridges, noticing the marks, even just shifting your gaze to your hands. And just noticing all the little lines as you move your hands up and down. What did you notice as we did that?
It felt so good. It kind of gave me goosebumps.
Mm-hmm. You're noticing something. What were you thinking about?
Kind of like pleasure, I guess. I don't know.
You weren't thinking about all the other stuff that you got going on in your life,
Nope.
right? It's a little break. And basically what you just experienced is the power of the self-command muscle. You were focused on something that was not everything else, right? You were able to break that connection. So both of these exercises just took a couple of seconds, right? And they helped quiet the saboteurs. They help quiet all of the thoughts that are going on in your head. And they're things that you can easily do at any point in the day. So when you're feeling that anxiety, that fear, that anger building up, right? And you take a moment to just pause and shift out of that headspace, you come back feeling a lot clearer. So just think about, we just did that for a couple of seconds and how that made you feel, right? So if you do a few more of these, imagine how that will make you feel, right? So every time you're doing those kinds of little exercises, you're working on building your fitness. Similar to like when you're working out, right? You start with small amount of reps and it builds up and you get stronger. So the task is to do these exercises so that you're doing them regularly, so that when you find yourself in a moment of where you're going to blow, you're now able to do them. You're able to kind of call on that. So all of the hard work you put into it is really preparing you for that. And so I talked about having a little bit of a different operating system, right? So we all have a system that we use right now, right? Where we react or, we get rattled with certain things. And, our phones are constantly reminding us to upgrade the operating system, right? I think there was just recently an Apple operating system. I still haven't done it. And but similar to us, we need to also work on updating our own operating systems. And so the positive intelligence system is, for the first step, is just for you to notice when you're feeling it. When you're feeling those negative emotions, notice it, stop. Remind yourself that you're in saboteur mode. Do some PQ reps to quiet the saboteurs and to activate the sage, to activate that clear-headed, focus. And then assume the sage perspective that every problem can be converted into a gift and opportunity. So, start asking yourself, what opportunity can be created from this? What's a different way of looking at this? What's something that I've learned from this? And then just focus on, providing, yourself with some empathy, or somebody else with an empathy, being curious about what is really going on, trying to think outside the box, and doing that from like a calmer, clearer place, right? So that it's really those 4 steps. So then the question becomes, is it really possible to shift from a saboteur to a sage, even in really tough challenges? So to bring this all together, think about when you start a relationship. You notice the best in the person, right? Everything, all the good things. You even say, oh, I just want to be a better person for them, right? Sometimes we do that. And what's happening is that your sage is activated by their sage, right? Like they're doing all of this nice stuff, so you want to do something really nice back. Your sages are activated. You're only noticing the good things. After a while in that same relationship, you start to notice other things. You start to make judgments. Your saboteurs start coming up, start kind of noticing the things that they do that annoy you. The same thing can happen with a new job or with a new program, right? You start school, everything's new and exciting, it's all great. And then with time, you start to notice other things, right? Conflict starts to arise, things start getting a little bit more challenging. And going back to that relationship example, you start building on each other's saboteurs as well. When you have a strong mental fitness, you're able to notice what's happening, and you're able to activate that operating system of stopping, noticing what's happening, offering some compassion back, which then has a similar, it can impact. It takes courage to be that first person to do that sometimes, right? But the benefits outweigh. And so, kind of looking at, is it really possible to shift? Well, yes, but the speed and depth takes time, and it depends on, how mentally fit you are in that moment. So today we talked about this, right? And like any training, you've got some new knowledge, right? That's that 20% insight, but it takes time to build it, right? So you have to work on doing those little PQ reps, working on, activating, recognizing your saboteurs, intercepting, activating your sage, doing those self-command muscles. And it really, takes that time and practice to do that. And they say that spending 15 minutes a day for 6 to 8 weeks can help you to increase and strengthen your mental fitness. So one of the things, because most people aren't disciplined enough to do this on their own, there's a whole program, a whole positive intelligence program around that. And one of the things that I'm really excited to be doing, and I'm doing this, I'm in the second round of this offering to Durham College students right now. I'm doing a 7-week long mental fitness boot camp that basically it involves a bit of a time commitment. So it's 7 weeks long. It involves 1 hour every weekend for 7 weeks of online self-guided. It's an app-based program where you have different modules, and it's an hour, but it's broken up into like smaller segments, so you don't have to sit down and do it all at once. And then every week for 7 weeks, We have a group coaching session where we get together on a Monday, and then the rest of the week you're working on those 15 minutes per day. And the students who participate in it get access to the app for a whole year for free. And they also get access to the Positive Intelligence book. It has an audio book as well as a PDF. And I'll be starting the next group in March. So any students that might be interested, you can reach out and email wellnesscoaching@durhamcollege.ca to let me know if this is something that you're interested in. We can book an appointment and have a conversation in the Campus Health and Wellness Center and go into a little bit more detail about it. But one of the feedback that we got from one of the students who participated in the very first offering was, they shared that before taking the mental fitness boot camp, that they would get stuck in negative feelings for long periods of time. But now, thanks to the boot camp, when their negative feelings were coming up, they were able to embrace them and react better by learning from those feelings and turning them into something good that helped them in the long run. And so even things like, we've heard stories of people who catch themselves, where they noticed they got upset, and then somebody that was doing the program with me shared how they had, stopped their car in front of somebody's driveway to drop their kid off at the daycare, and it was quick. So there was lots of cars or whatever. They quickly went in, and when they were coming out, the owner of the driveway was standing there really upset and kind of was just lost it on him. And then, guy was like, man, I gotta drop off my kid and get to work. What's the big deal, kind of thing. And then he took a moment, he realized that he was getting all upset, and he took a moment and was like, how annoying must this be for this guy? Because probably I'm not the only person who does this. And then he just kind of shifted and was like, and he said that to the guy, you know what? I just realized, how annoying must this be for you to have? And he's like, yeah, constantly every day people are stopping here, right? And all of a sudden it diffused it. And they both kind of just laughed it off almost and walked away from it. So that's an example of how it can shift, right? All of a sudden you're noticing that. So if you're interested in registering, make sure that you reach out to me so that we can get you into the session. But as we wrap up, and I realize I've gone a couple minutes over, so my apologies for that. I'm curious, what are your takeaways from today? What did you learn?
I think the biggest thing is to just pause, right? Take that moment to slow down. Whatever you do with that moment, there's lots of things you could do with it, but to pause is the first step. That's what I will practice in the next couple weeks.
Wonderful.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Lucy.
You're welcome. Anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
I think I never realized that mental fitness is malleable. I always thought that I was kind of just born with this idea of when I'm faced with struggles that I just get anxious and that's just me and I have to deal with it. But yeah, it's definitely a new perspective that I can train myself to approach things differently, and instead of using negative emotions to fuel my desire to finish things or meet deadlines or whatever it may be, that I can approach it from a different perspective and get a much more sustainable result and still achieve my goals.
Wonderful. I wish you all the best with that. In doing that. Yeah. So does anybody have any, further questions or comments?
That was great, Lucy. Thanks so much. It was really, it was very insightful for sure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for attending. I'm going to stop recording things.